Hello everyone, it's Kelli Folsom here, and I want to welcome you back to Module 2 in our Beginner's Oil Painting series. In this module, I'm going to be talking to you about value. So it's said that color gets all the attention in a painting, but value does all the work. So you can liken value to, say, the framework of a house or the skeletal bone structure of a human body, whereas what might get all the attention is the muscles and the outer appearance, but it is the skeleton that is creating the structure for all of the attention getters to sit on top of. So the degree in which you understand value is the degree in which your paintings will be more successful. So let's dive in and discuss more about value. All right, so what is value anyway? Well, value is simply the degree of light or darkness that something has. For example, this is light, this is dark. And these are the two extremes. White is the lightest value, black is the darkest value, and then we have all other values in between, some that are more on the light side of the values and some that are more on the dark side of the values, and some that are kind of right in the middle in between. Now, every single one of these colors, although they are a color, also has a value to it. So first, I want to talk to you about the value scale. And in painting, you want to have at least a minimum of 3 values. So one that is on the darker side. Okay, obviously, let's see here. One that is on the opposite extreme side of the light. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to end up with 5, let's say. So we're going to leave this square white there. But let's say we have you need a minimum of 3 values in a painting, and I would say 5 values maximum. You know, there's numerous values out there in real life, but the more values you start to use, the weaker the painting is actually going to look. So, for example, let's say if I wanted to stick with 3 values, I might do one that is sort of that middle value, a dark value, a middle value, and a light value. So maybe this is our sort of our middle value here. So you need at least 3 to get the ball rolling. And then if you want to add a couple of more, you can. We'll just put some white up here just for reference. So we know that this is the lightest value that we're going to have in a painting. Probably the bulk of the painting is going to be more in this range, and then with some dark accents. Now, let's say if we wanted to add a couple more values to that, we can go a step lighter in between the absolute white paint over here and get a sort of a step of value on this ladder of value. And then we can also go obviously a step darker, where this is a little bit lighter than the black, but also darker than that middle tone range. Now we're just going to be working in black and white on this to illustrate this, but this is a very simple value scale right here. And I recommend that you don't worry about doing like a full 10 value scale. In painting, you actually want to do less with value and more with color, more with edges, but you want a really clear, strong value structure underneath your painting. So a simple yet strong value structure on every painting. So I'm going to leave a little room here because I do want to show you about colors and the value of colors. So, however, over here, we get a little tiny touch of medium just to get some flow. So the value structure of a painting. In painting, we're dealing with a visual language. And so with that, how do we identify things in the world? How do we separate out one thing from another? How does the human eye do that? How does it make sense of that? I'm going to divide this into 2 squares. The way that we make sense of that is through contrast. And value contrast is usually the first way that we can make sense of that. For example, if you think about camouflage, the reason why camouflage works is because everything is very similar, whether that's very similar in color, most of the time very similar in value. You can even have some color variation and still have camouflage work. But it has very little contrast, right? So the first contrast we need to learn, obviously, is value contrast. So if we use, let's say, 3 of these values, and we already have a white canvas here, so what would be something that we could put against white that would show up? Well, that might be something dark. Maybe it's a dark vase. We'll invent a little cast shadow here coming off the side. But when you just have 2 values, that is a very graphic look, much like, the old posters or perhaps even sketches that you might have seen in graphic novels, or the old silhouette, like when they would do the portrait silhouette cutouts in black paper. You must have at least always 2 values in order to make a shape appear on a canvas. And the more contrast, the better, because that gives you obviously more impact. So we have 2 values here. What if we introduced a third, and maybe this time this is the one of our middle tone values. So we could still do, because this vase is so dark, we could still do a middle tone value and still have that vase show up. Still have contrast, in other words, and maybe we have the tabletop staying in the white value. So this would be like a dark against a lighter concept, dark against light. So this is one of the most basic value structure ideas that you can use in painting. But the key thing I'm trying to get you to understand is that is contrast, and in this case, value contrast, and not using too many little values. All right, now what if you wanted to say, okay, let's get a highlight on this vase, then maybe I can go to white there, white there. We've got white already on the tabletop. Maybe that is creating a reflection, so I could use that, and I want to see the reflection, definitely want to see the highlight. Okay, so we're kind of getting a little bit more advanced here as far as the look of the thing, a little more detail or a little more nuance. But the whole value structure is set up on 3 values. So now let's do the opposite of that, where we do light against dark. Just like this painting here, the whole concept here is light objects against dark objects. And then I do have a darker object in the foreground which is darker than the light of the tabletop plane. So once you understand value contrast, you can really start to have fun with playing with value contrast in your paintings. But your whole design of your painting should start with a value idea, whether that's light against dark, dark against light. It could also be dark and light against a middle tone. That would still give you contrast. Actually, let's do that. Let's just split this in half so we can do a third one. These are the three basic ideas, I would say. So maybe in this case we have, let's just do another vase, a light vase against dark. You can also see how just by using a more of a sheer coverage, it also, black looks like a middle tone whenever you thin it down and make it sheer. So it doesn't always have to be thick paint. All right, so let's do a light vase. I'm going to go for this one right here. Not all straight white, but the next rung down. And let's just do a similar object, white vase. And I'm going to take that background a little darker. Okay, let's go back to our black. When I paint, I don't clean out my brush with spirits. I just use a Viva paper towel to wipe off the paint, and that works really nicely. We'll make this one a little bit of a different shape. And once again, we have contrast. Now, maybe this tabletop this time goes to that middle tone color. So I'm going to go about the next rung down to get my three values in. And like I said, you can use more than three. 3 is usually the minimum in order to create depth and form. 2 gets very graphic and almost poster-like. Maybe we've got some tabletop back here behind the cast shadow on the table. So a minimum of 3, and if you want to use more, you can. Now this value could also work for the form shadow on this face. If there's like a cast shadow underneath here. And also I should say that the more simplified, so 3 is like the most simple you can go and still get form, but also, what was I going to say? Wow, I totally lost my train of thought. Maybe let's pretend like there is a little pattern on this vase or something. Maybe there's a little design, and that could be in sort of a middle tone value. And for example, let's just add in, okay, maybe a 4th value, which is the white of the highlight. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So sorry, I just remembered. Oh my goodness. Don't you hate that whenever you just lose a thought like that? So what I was going to say is, however, the more values you add in, the more the painting does tend to fall apart. So I am now adding in a 4th and even a 5th value, but I would say no more than 5 values. So now I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this tabletop plane, just kind of in front, leaving some of that other value back behind. So the simpler you can make your value structure, the better, within reason, obviously. Again, 3 being the absolute limit of the fewest you can use. Okay, so let's just do one more example where, so as you can see here, this is still all light against dark. So the vase is light in front of the dark background, the tabletop is light in front of the dark background, even though, we're using 3 different values of light. All right, let's do this next one where we have a middle tone value. Looks like I'm going to need some more paint here. So I'm going to use I can pick either one of these 3 really, but I think these 2 are going to lead to the best result. since this one is so light, that's almost to white. So this value structure would be a middle tone background with darks and lights against it. So that three options, I would say, is really all you need, honestly. These three simple value structures. Dark against light, light against dark, or dark and light against middle tone. All right, so this time we will put another dark vase. I guess we'll stick with the vase idea in front of, maybe this one's a little taller and more slender. So the reason why I want to cover value is because, again, it is the foundation of every painting. Every successful painting has a clear and successful value structure. And then maybe we put, maybe this has like a white bowl or something in it in the painting. So we have black and white against middle tone. Just making this up, making up the object here. So, and then of course you can go more into detail, but these are the three basic value structures, you know. So if you wanted to get, maybe I should turn that into a wine bottle. And then, for example, if I wanted to start to bring in another middle tone, but go with like a lighter middle tone, I could do that in the front as a tabletop color, because usually this plane, the top plane, is getting more light. And this could also be the background color, the background value. Could also be perhaps I have a shadow on this bowl. That could be the value of the shadow. So you want to make sure that you continue to use basically the same, repeat the same values throughout the painting so that the painting structure holds together. Okay. You know, of course, too, you could even do like a little highlight on the bowl or on the back of the bowl as well. So, and again, this value can get repeated as perhaps it's like a reflection into the vase. But again, using the same values and trying to stick with those same values. And I would say definitely no more than 5. The last thing I want to leave you with on value for this lesson is that each color has a value. Okay? So white, this is pure white, that is our lightest value. What value would this be? So I actually encourage you to take a photo of your palette and turn it into black and white so that you can really see the values. So, however, if you hold your palette knife over, you're going to see, even though this has color, you're going to be able to see whether or not it kind of melts away against the gray or if it pops. It definitely pops against the black. It pops also against the white. This value is the one that it kind of melts with the most. So this is Naples Yellow. And again, I'm not looking to perfectly match the value. I'm just trying to identify, okay, the colors that I'm using on my palette, what value is each of them approximately? So here, yellow ochre is actually a bit darker. It tends to stand out a bit more against this lighter gray. So I'm going to assign yellow ochre to this gray. And now we move into the cadmiums. And this cad lemon is very, very light. Yep, it's going to be in the same. This might be the color that is closest to the value of white. Okay, but as you can see, the Naples Yellow Light and the Cad Lemon are actually about the same value. It's just one is more intense in color, one is a little more dull in color. Now we've got the Cad Yellow Deep, and you know, it kind of, even the names of the colors kind of tell you a little bit about, you know, deep meaning darker. And you know, this one, it actually looks a little lighter than the ochre, but darker than the, so this one's kind of in between these two values here. We're starting to actually see a really beautiful gradation form up. So let's hop over to, say, Cad Red Light. This is moving into the red family. And I know from experience that red is usually a middle tone value. It's just that it's so bright that it tends to confuse us and make us think that it's lighter in value. And I feel like it's popping a little bit more against this darker gray. So I feel like it belongs a little bit more with this lighter gray. And you're probably seeing right now just what I explained in the first video, that I lay my palette out according to value or close to it. I try to lay everything out according to light and dark, and also to group colors together. This one definitely, the Venetian red definitely stands out against that gray. And of course what you can do is take a photo of this after you're done, turn it into black and white, and see how close you were on your value assessment of color. So the next color is a transparent red oxide. Ooh, this one's really dark. Now these kind of get tricky because these are transparent colors, and so if they go down, when they're thick, they look darker. When they're thinner, they actually look lighter. So, but we'll just put it down thick. I guess we'll put it down thick down here, thicker, because that's definitely a darker value. And then you could see how if you took it thinner and more transparent, it's definitely going to line up more with that gray. But the main thing is that you start to learn to see value. And one way, this is alizarin crimson, by the way, and that definitely is a dark, just like the red oxide, like a blood red. So one way that you can start to do this is just by doing black and white studies of your setups, and then take, just set up one simple thing, and even though it's in color, paint it in black and white, really trying to just analyze the values, and then take a photo of, let's say if it's a vase, take a photo of the setup and of your painting, turn them both into black and white, and just test yourself on your observation skills. If you just want to get better at being able to see, well, what is that value? Now again, in nature, you do have to be careful with that, because that's just a training process. And in nature, you're going to see innumerable values. But in painting, again, we don't want to use innumerable values. We want to use few values. So again, you can use that as a training exercise, or like what I'm doing here, coming up with training exercises to help you judge the value of a color. But as far as that goes, you don't want to fall into the trap of trying to get in the mode of just copying everything that you're seeing, because that doesn't really work either. All right, and that is the phthalo green cool. So as you can see, all these colors on the right hand side tend to fall in that black zone. So the main thing I want to leave you with is, of course, just a basic understanding of value, but also how value is used in painting. Because, for example, in drawing, all we have to use is value, and so we use as many values as we can. Let's say with charcoal drawing, graphite drawing, but in painting, ta-da, we have color and saturation, and we also have paint quality and edges. We don't have any of that in drawing. So in painting, we want to use those other elements, the color and the edges, to do more to create form rather than chasing, 20 different values in our painting. So the fewer values you use, the more impact your painting is going to have. If you are looking for a value structure to begin with, here are the 3 basic value structures for you to start with. Dark against a lighter value. This could even go lighter, really. Light against dark, and then dark and light against a middle tone. All right, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you in the next module.